Now let's have a quick conversation again. Now, just when the dust seems to be settling on activities of what has become known as political vigilantism in the country, Tamale woke up to yet another news of a group calling itself Kandahar Boys. As you may know, we've done that story already, and their activities at the Tamale Teaching Hospital. My special guest for today is a leadership expert. He teaches in the U.S., is the author of 3 leadership books, the first Political Party Followership and Political Leadership in Africa. His name is Dr. Enoch Opoku Enchi, and I'm just going to introduce him to you quickly. Well, there he is. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. I just want to find out, and I believe that you've read this story about the Kandahar Boys, so these boys calling themselves Kandahar Boys, and what they've done at the Tamale Teaching Hospital. What's your reading of that? This is not the first time, actually. We've had this happen a couple of times after the government changed hands. We've been talking about it a lot. So it's quite surprising for a lot of people that it's still happening and that we saw it today. What's your reading from your expertise?
I want to give a prelude to an event that I attended at Wayne University in Michigan, US, where I was one of the panelists with a former president of Mozambique, Joaquim Chissano. And a Nigerian asked this question, that how should African democracy look like? And we got back to the same vigilante thing, which is, pockets of spreading everywhere in Africa, where people who think they are muzzled will just go in there and then bombard their way to people who have been appointed by government. I think we're treading on a very dangerous ground. One thing I know in leadership is that leadership is too important to be left to leaders alone. If we have this Kandahar group, which is a vigilante group, trying to say that a CEO appointed by the president is incompetent. Who determines an incompetent person in a position as a CEO? And how much do they know about hospital administration that they say is incompetent? Every leader appointed by the president reflects on his judgment. So if people have problems, they should go through the due process instead of just going there using force, because we don't live in a banana republic. And I think this nonsense must stop, because we cannot live in a country where people can just move in and then forcefully take somebody who is duly appointed by a council out of office. It doesn't augur well for us. We should stop it.
What do acts like this speak of leadership of a particular country?
It means that there's problem of leadership, but 80% of leadership is followership. And unfortunately, we don't have critical friends in our own parties, political parties, who can just come and say that enough is enough of this so that we stop. Once somebody belongs to a political party, and political parties are just different side of persuasions. So if you belong to MPP or NDC, you belong to one side of persuasion that if you are given the mandate, this is how you're going to rule. Leadership, you are just a servant. You are a steward holding the position in trust. But unfortunately, people think leadership is life and death. That is not how it is. You are just coming to serve people. So if people are fighting and pushing others and moving them from offices, then we have to question our form of leadership and followership in Africa, because it doesn't augur well for us.
Questioning the form of leadership and followership, is there a way to work around it that gives us some sort of benefits?
We shouldn't work around it. We should work in it. We should work in it and stop it, because it is not going to augur well for our democracy. If one day there's another vigilante group that wakes up and says that the president is incompetent, so they forcefully go to the Flagstaff House and take him out, what is going to happen to the country?
I'm sure they'll be
yes,
out.
So now it's one CEO, others think it's okay. The next day is going to be the IGP, the next day is going to be another person. Then what kind of democracy do we have?
Is there a way, from your perspective and from a leadership perspective, I mean, you've studied leadership, that's your expertise. Is there a way that we can actually harness the strength of young men like this, or groups like this, for national benefits or for development? So
I believe education and critical friendship are two things that are key in solving this problem. Education has always been part of every solution in our world. So this situation where people think they can muzzle their way to do whatever they want, that is lawlessness. It is lawlessness, and we should stop it. So apart from education, we also need critical friends in the political party. This Kandahar group, I'm told, belongs to the ruling party, the New Patriotic Party. Where are the MPP folks who will tell them that, look, you cannot do this? Because the person went through a vetting process. He was interviewed and appointed by a council. And you sat down, you were not part of the process, but now you're sitting back and say that person is not competent. What prevents you from writing a petition to the council so that the due process is followed and the person is duly investigated, and if he's found to be incompetent, they take him out of office? I think that the laws must work in this country. We have the laws, but implementation and the way we enforce it is not helping us at all.
If you had the opportunity to speak to any of the country's leadership, assuming you have the president seated in front of you as an expert, what sort of advice would you give him?
The president should put his feet on the ground. This cannot continue because it's breeding lawlessness. It is not creating an image, a good image of this country to the rest of the world. And today is a CEO. The next day, we saw what happened in Kumasi to a minister. And we know that eventually it might go to another person.
The national security.
The national security. We know what happened there. They stormed at the court. And we need critical friends in MPP who should tell the president, and the president know what goes on. The president should give a press statement and say that enough of this is not going to happen again, because he needs to put his feet on the ground and maintain calmness in the party and the country. Okay.
Well, let's wrap up with yourself. You're Ghanaian based in the U.S. You're looking to move back soon?
Yes, I'll go tomorrow.
I mean, you move back to Ghana, I mean.
Yes, I'm trying to come back and help because this is the land of my birth.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So how long is it going to take you to move back?
I've been trying to come and help. I came to Parliament to do a research. That was the book for political leadership and followership. And I found out the corruption that we have in Africa comes from delegates. The expectations of delegates corrupt our political leaders. So that was my finding for that book.
So this is work you did in Ghana's Parliament.
Yes, that was my dissertation, my doctoral dissertation, which was published in Germany.
And the responses you got from the politicians was that they are influenced by the delegates?
I did a mirror study. I interviewed 92 parliamentarians and 92 delegates, and then I reflected on the studies to see what the expectations of delegates, what the expectations are on the leaders, which is the MPs, and the expectations of the MPs on the delegates. Simply, delegates are like children of the MPs. And what happens is that they always go to them to demand money. And if you go to a leader to demand money, the leader must also find a way to get the money back. So the corruption in this country and most part of Africa is coming from the delegate. We should look at that and educate the delegates that if somebody comes to you with money, 2,000 Ghana here, 5,000 Ghana here, it is the same money that is supposed to be used to build roads and bridges. They should ask them to go and build roads and bridges. Because if you are selfish and you sell your conscience and you take that kind of money, the country as a whole suffers.
What were the recommendations as to how to deal with this?
Like I said, education has always been part of every solution, that we need to educate the delegates. There are many delegates who don't even have a job, and then they think that the time for this, when somebody is running for office, is their cocoa season to make money. That it shouldn't be the case.
Okay. So this is your latest book, Hands-on Teaching and Evidence-Based Learning in Africa. That's it. What's in this book? What did you find?
I finished school at University of Cape Coast. I did educational psychology. I taught in class 4. I've been a teacher all my life, even though I've worked with Pearson as a manager and graded and been a professor and a research fellow and all that. I found that our education, I interviewed about 25 African citizens, different countries, that our education has always been you chew, you pour, and you forget. So this book, Hands-on Teaching and Evidence-Based Learning, my vision is that within the next 10, 15, 20 years, we're going to have Google, we're going to have Amazon, we're going to have eBay coming from Africa. Because what we teach in our curriculum is not learning. If you read this book and you produce exactly the same book to me, to a teacher, and get an A, you haven't done anything. Because if we are all thinking the same, then nobody's thinking. Okay. But if you look at Bloom taxonomy, where learning takes place is where we create something out of the learning environment. So this book is for business and industry, that any teacher should have a copy. Once you get a copy, Hands-on Teaching and Evidence-Based Learning in Africa, you are going to use a lot of scaffolding activities that by the time the student finish leaving your class, they can create something from what they learn from you.
Okay.
So learning is not a consumption, but a creation. And that is what this book is about.
So you're basically, your leadership, the problems of leadership that you identify basically is tied in with the sort of education.
Yes.
That's the bottom line. Let me take your very final words, sir.
My final word is that leadership is very, very important. Again, I repeat, to be left to leaders alone. 80% of leadership is followership. And because of that, the followership is very critical in developing our democracy in Africa. Every leader in the world leads in anticipation of what the followers want. And if you look at how Africa is messed up, I go to a lot of conferences and you see that Africa is always behind in development. And you go to many places, they are really doing well. So what is going on here? Unfortunately, in our country, we have MPP and NDC. Everything is in the name of MPP and NDC. But who is fighting for the image of Ghana? And I think that is what we should all focus on, that Ghana first. We are all Ghanaians. We should not look at things in our political lenses. And we should have critical friends who are going to critique the government in your own government so that when Ghana does well, we all enjoy the country of our birth.
Critical friends within the political party. Now, sometimes those critical friends tend to be, they corrupt those who are not corrupted along the line anyway. But thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Dr. Enoch Opoku-Enchi, he holds a doctorate in organizational leadership from Indiana Western University in the United States. He teaches there. He's a leadership expert, throwing his thoughts out on the vigilantism and the wave of it that we're seeing today.